They who speak in the language of dead genres are in the business of extracting from culture, pulling roots and never planting seeds. They speak of barren land as if they are not the ones depleting it of its nutrients. The same thing physics tells us about energy applies to genre. It never dies, it transforms. Charisse C, February 2026 on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to talk to you again.
Hey.
We connected in 2021. I saw one of your sets on YouTube. And then I went to another YouTube channel and you were doing an interview with someone and you were speaking about your kind of musical upbringing and history. And I was like, okay, this person knows how to speak about music. And it's super interesting. And then I started deep diving further and further into Amapiano and Southern African house music genres. Can you give us a short introduction to Amapiano? Just define it in the most simple way.
Amapiano is a genre from South Africa. It is a descendant of house music. I'd say it's a hybrid. It's an amalgamation of South Africa's identity as a house music nation, but also the kind of many local genres that have kind of defined the country over the years, from like Kwaito to like jazz is a big thing in South Africa, and sounds like Bacardi from Pretoria, from Durban. It kind of, unlike anything else before, South Africa has birthed a lot of genres, but unlike anything else before, I think Amapiano encompasses the spirit of the country in a really broad way while still having a really clear and distinct sonic identity, which kind of sits in the space of being a mid-tempo genre. So it's like 113, maybe 112 to like 115 BPM. And it has the same kind of structures of house music in terms of this being like long, like 7-minute songs with a break in the middle and a build up and a drop and then a second drop after that. And beyond the music, I'd say it is a cultural phenomenon, like a movement that really shifted what South Africa, how people understand in the world understand South Africa as a country, and also just a new generation of Black people all over the world, like kind of this reclaiming this connection to house music in a way that I think there was a generation that became disconnected from it and kind of saw it as something that is like over there for like a different, like that's just not for us. And Amapiano, I think, really shifted that and then became a gateway for people to discover everything else that's been happening in South Africa for a long time.
Why did that kind of explosion happen in 2020?
I think it was like a combination of like right place, right time. You know, like Amapiano was booming right at this time when like the world had closed, and the people that were kind of really moving the genre were working super, super hard. There was like a consistent output of music, of recorded mixes going online, and it kind of really filled up this space that became like an empty space for so many people. I think a lot of the entertainment that people were experiencing around music was largely kind of dominated by Amapiano. And then I think it also is just something that is new in a way that it's very rare that we kind of experience genres that genuinely are new in the way that they sound. And there was this curiosity that people had because it was then coupled with people observing how people party in South Africa, which is a very unique experience that I think many people had never seen before. So there was this intrigue, and then there was the dances that came with that. And then this excitement for when the world opens up, we'll get to experience this for the first time. It was like 2 years of music that people had never ever heard outside. Like it'd only ever been experienced in their homes and or in, you know, like in parties that people were having outside of that. But yeah, I think that's why it kind of blew up at that time. It was just right timing. And I think for a lot of African people, it was like the first time something that was inherently, well, not the first time because we had Afro beats, but it's in a different space, you know, when we're talking about electronic dance music and house music. So I think it was just right timing.
And then where did you hit at that time? So you were writing and DJing. So you're DJing on like No Signal Radio. So this was like you mixing and putting up interviews at home.
Yeah.
And then like broadcasting to the world. And then you are also coming out as a DJ, like into the clubs. Not for the first time, but for the first time in this guise, right?
Yeah. It was, No Signal happened. Yeah, started the show. Abandu was the show. And again, it was just trying to document everything that was happening at that moment in time. I felt like we needed more journalism, better journalism. And I could feel that what was happening here was unprecedented. And I just kept thinking about, if like 5 years from now, will people be able to reference back what was happening? And so I was like, okay, cool, let me create this kind of digital archive in real time of me navigating my journey as an artist, as a DJ, and playing in the only space that I can play right now, but also then having these interviews over Zooms. And for a lot of people, it was like their first international interview that they'd done, or the first time that they'd talked about their music extensively in that way. And then that just kind of birthed this community and this tribe of people interested in what it is I was doing, but also I guess was the beginning of me being a tastemaker and ambassador within this space. So by the time we came out, I'd been DJing already for 3 years before that. And that was really the beginning of me finding my pocket, the thing that is Charisse's thing and sound. So by the time we came out, it was okay, there's a really clear vision and an output that I have, and an interest of people that want to experience it, that have been listening to this show for the last 2 years. So yeah, just kind of, and then the genre was then having its boom at the same time. So I feel like me and Amapiano were having our breakthrough at the same time.
Yeah, my interaction with it, and one of the squares that I think it inspired was new music won't blow through old distribution. So in 2020, I got YouTube Premium, and it meant that I had no ads on YouTube. And then I would watch sets, Major League and Scorpion Kings and all these things, and I'll just search other Amapiano things and just see what's happening there. So I think one of the things that caught me really early was the way the camera would move through the events, and it would be okay, a loft party or a house party or something like that, or something outside. And it was such a difference from a boiler room setup, which positioned the camera on the DJ kind of static, and it wasn't really focused about dancing. It was about action, DJ, hands in the air. Why did people shoot that way, or maybe view the dancers as the central character versus the DJ?
There's a particular period of Major League's Balcony Mix series where they diverted it, I think it was the second or third season, where they diverted it away from the DJs and started bringing in artists. So they would always be them and back-to-back somebody. And then at that point, it was kind of a lot more focused on everything else and what was happening and the experience of the music. I think that is just kind of very reflective of how you experience music in South Africa. The dance floor truly is this kind of collective energy, and people have this freedom in their bodies and this connection to their bodies that I feel is just second to none. And the music, there's also a high caliber in terms of how music is experienced, because a lot of people can DJ in South Africa. There isn't a shortage of DJs in the country, and people also really have studied the music when I'm talking about house music. And so it means everybody is in this experience fully understanding what it is that's going on, from the history of it to where we are now, and this kind of liberation and freedom. So I think it follows the people like that, because that's what is interesting about the spaces. I think DJs really understand their role as not custodians, but they're vessels for the music and for this space, and they have a duty to the music and to everybody that has kind of come to be patrons of that space. And so I think the camera work just kind of reflects that in a way that I think other forms of using the camera weren't necessarily around documenting, hey, we have this culture and this way of living and this way of moving over here. Come and experience it. It was kind of, the intended outcome was different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then do you think that helped translate what was happening there to here, in Europe and the UK and maybe the rest of the world? Do you think we adapted our worlds to fit Amapiano, or we kind of kept our worlds the same and then Amapiano fit in it? Where do you sit on this? Because you told me about all the different kinds of experience you've had with it in London. It's can you give me a bit more of a shape of what
I think at the beginning there wasn't any kind of adapting of the sound to the context, if we're speaking about the UK specifically, because people had been experiencing it in its purest form and with this curiosity of this way that people party and move. And one of the things you were saying earlier is like, there's also, parties aren't always necessarily like running into the middle of the night. Like a party in South Africa can start from like 12 p.m. and people are coming up with like cooler boxes and they're eating and they're lounging all the way up until like past 1 a.m. And there's this like clear delivery and this whole journey of the music that you go, maybe you start with deep house, maybe some R&B, you'll have a hip hop moment, then you have the Amapiano moment, and we kind of go through all the different sounds in that way. And where I feel like here, we have less of, it's like a raving culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so you experience music in a dark room and everybody's standing. It's like a warehouse space. And it's like all stripped to like the elements, basically. It's just this dark room, the like music, and that's it. Whereas in South Africa, there's more of like hospitality. There's this experience of being able to be comfortable within a space. Sit if you want to sit, stand if you want to stand. There's a space for the dance floor. Then there's a space for everything else. And so it also allows this thing to be intergenerational as well. Like, and I think that started to be adopted a lot more because people were watching that on these live streams and these YouTube mixes and like just on social media. So I was seeing a lot more people kind of creating these day experiences. Like there was a party at the very beginning, right out of lockdown. One of the first ones was Amapiano and Chill. And they were doing things like importing shisha into the parties because that's a huge thing. It's called hubbly in South Africa. And people would just sit and they're smoking and they're eating. And then the specific drinks like Savannah and Hunter, like ciders that are drunk a lot. And so they were importing specifically the one from South Africa because it tastes different to the one that you buy here. And then they were also doing it in spaces that are like venues. So there was a pub in Catford that they used to do it in. One of the first ones, they did it in Welling. These aren't spaces that have sound, but they've got the kind of experience where you can sit. They've got the outdoor thing. They've got the covers. They've got heaters. And he would bring in the sound. This is Leon that was running this party. And so what he did was kind of be able to simulate the experience of listening to the music in the place that like it comes from. And having that, I think that really shifted things for a lot of people and changed the way that people could experience music, house music, dance music in this country. And then at some point, it started to turn the other way where DJs were kind of experiencing completely new levels of success. I think we know a DJ like Black Coffee as being one of South Africa's biggest exports. But what Amapiano did was open up the floodgates for a whole new generation of people that you could have made a song last month and then within a week you're like the biggest thing ever and now we're touring off of the back of this first song that you've released. And that kept happening over and over again. And it was this experience where people being able to kind of come over and travel and like listen to, like have the people listen to the music from them. But then there was, I think, a ceiling that people started to see and people kind of wanting to cross over into a different echelon when it comes to house music and electronic dance music more widely and into the places that are considered the meccas of that, like the Berlins and the Ibizas. And that, I think, was where the first time the tide started turning, where people were kind of trying to tailor elements of the music to make more sense in those spaces. I think before then, one of the most beautiful things about the genre is it was unapologetic. Like it didn't try to assimilate to anything or make sense to anybody. It was what it was.
And then, like, I guess the people that were raving to it here or dancing to it here, maybe it's a better word.
Yeah.
Were they mainly just people of the diaspora, or was it like wider? Did you recognize like, oh, like why are all these Jamaicans up in here? What was the makeup of the people in the, I guess, the first wave coming out of lockdown?
At the beginning, there had been these parties that existed before that was very much Southern African diaspora. So these spaces where people were creating this home away from home. And they kind of continued first as we came out. Then there were a few other people, like DJs in the UK scene, that started curating nights because they'd been listening to it and were interested in it and had been playing it in their bedrooms at home. That kind of started putting on things. And so it became a wide, like, Black British London thing when you kind of go out to spaces. And then at some point it extended even further, where just anyone, I feel like that kind of makes up the identity of London you could find in the dance floor. But largely, I think the identity of it is very much a diaspora sound. It's this thing, when I was saying about Black people all over the world having this like reconnection to house music, but also I remember when Afrobeats kind of came out the gate as popular culture. I was in secondary school at that time, and there's this like collective pride that everybody experienced. Like, you didn't have to be like, when it was at the time of Azonto, you didn't have to be Ghanaian, and when it was the time of like the Nigerian Afrobeats, you didn't have to be Nigerian to feel this like pride in seeing ourselves in a way that we hadn't ever seen ourselves before, without having to try to be anything. Like, we're speaking in our own languages, the rhythms are ours, the dance moves are ours, and I think Amapiano was like another coming up of something like that.
And it never felt like it was trying to be legible to, I guess, the British experience in that way.
No.
Or to like, I guess, like white people or Europeans or the West. You know what I mean? Like, people use all these different phrases to like mean, okay, the West or, you know what I mean, the UK. Yeah. And I think that's like pretty unique, consider like the genres that have been born out of London, the UK in general, like for the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, there's always been that tension of like trying to make it understandable to the whole country, right? Whereas this thing is not even thinking about the rest. It's not thinking about us.
Yeah.
And then coming out of like Amapiano, like there are all these other kind of genres and scenes and kind of offshoots of what's happening.
Yeah.
Does that make it easier or harder to translate what you do to here?
At one point, it was great because Amapiano kind of opened this door where everybody was interested. South African culture became popular culture in a way that it never had before. The type of slang that people were using became things that people was in like everyday language. In that way, we kind of have always known things like patois and like pidgin and being part of the language. But then it meant that everything coming out of South Africa was kind of defined under the umbrella of Amapiano, which wasn't really a bad thing at the beginning because it made it easier to kind of funnel the ideas that people were exploring, and for me to kind of have this anchor. So it's like I'm introducing a new sound. I think if I was to come in with I am these 5 things that people have never heard of before, like it just wasn't going to make sense. It was going to be very difficult to get people to understand it. So having this one anchor that then stuck with that for quite a while, and then eventually people started looking for more. Be like, okay, what else is coming from this place? And then people were kind of referring to genres like 3-step and gom, like, oh, Amapiano 3-step or 3-step Amapiano. Or like people would say to me after a set when I'd played gom, for example, like, I've never heard this type of Amapiano before. And then there was room to then educate at that point because now you're responding to people's curiosity as opposed to kind of like throwing a bunch of things at somebody who's just never even heard of it before. It was like, okay, I've come in with this one thing that you've had this interest in, and that's kind of opened up for you to start asking me more questions about other things that I'm playing. And then there's this point for it to be this exchange that's back and forth. So I feel like that's what happened. And Amapiano really allowed that to then, to connect with more people and other sounds.
And then how does that connect to Afro House? Like, that is usually the term that people use to describe like house music from the continent. And then this other, I guess, genre or movement happening outside of Africa.
Yeah.
Like, is there a link between like Afro House, like the commercial entity that I hear in coffee shops, supermarkets, everywhere around the world, and what has happened in South Africa? Like, is there like a link, or is there like a completely separate thread?
It's really tricky with Afro House right now, and it's a huge point of debate. And I think the naming of it, Afro House is something that has different identities in different regions of the continent. So you'll have like Angola has its own Afro House identity, and it has like Kuduro and like their sounds that kind of branch off from there. But then you have South Africa, which has been very much at the forefront of what most people kind of understand as Afro House. But because it has these different identities in different places, there's been a long kind of standing debate of where it even originated from in the first place. I think for me, I'll focus on the South African context, and I feel like it's the beginning of how South Africa became understood as a house music nation. A lot of what was coming from the US was trickling into South Africa, especially through these like record stores. And this is something that like somebody like a Heavy K and like there's people that were there at the beginning of that time, like your Da Capos and people that were listening to the house music, the original house music that we know, and then kind of thinking, well, how do we put our kind of African spin on it? And so then you started having elements of sounds that were kind of borrowing from Guaido, borrowing from Bacardi, borrowing from these things that are like intrinsic to the country, but then connecting it into this thread of house music. And I'd say from there, even something like a Guaido is also derivative of house. It's this kind of this mid-tempo beat, but then it kind of really connected with like hip hop and township culture in South Africa. And so by the time you get to an Amapiano, we've gone through generations of like renditions of house music in South Africa. Like deep house is its own thread, Afro tech is its own thread. Each of these things have different identities and also different cultures in terms of the way that people experience the music. Like when you go to a deep house event, it's very, very different to going to an Afro tech event. And there's certain spaces that are very purist in that way in South Africa. And then spaces where they're a bit more multi-genre, especially in a city like Johannesburg, which is like the center of everything. You'll kind of go to some parties where you experience a bit of everything throughout. This is why the defining of things is so important. And again, Amapiano being able to move in a way because it had something very specific that was like, it has its subgenres underneath it, but they all kind of are connected. Whereas with Afro House, it's been tricky because it has so many faces that all exist under this one name. And then now we're in this place where at one point, like it was kind of dead in a way, and it's having this resurgence again now, but then has become this really diluted, digestible, like formulaic sound. That is what you're saying is you hear in like coffee shops and you hear in spaces where it's really commercial. And for me, it kind of gives elevator music. That's what it sounds like for the most part. And that is becoming the face of Afro House. And there are a lot of things, like some people call it like the kind of music, like house. That sound is what people kind of now widely associate with Afro House. And it's become something that is palatable in a way. But if you kind of go deeper into it, it's like Amapiano in the sense that it has all these different sounds and these producers that have defined different threads of it. So I feel like it's hard to answer that question because we're still in the middle of trying to figure out how to anchor that thing. I don't think it's been figured out yet. And it's also a huge point of contention at the moment.
Is this why people say Amapiano is dead? Is that a connection to that thread of something being so popular and visible? And then they're like, oh, if that is the popular thing right now, then Amapiano is dead.
Yeah, and that's always happened in South Africa. There's always been a genre that comes to the forefront. Mm-hmm. And is the biggest thing in that moment and is everywhere and dominates. And then the cycle changes and something else comes into the forefront. And every time that cycle changes, the previous one is declared dead. And like, I can almost say, like at a point, have we not seen this happen enough times to know that it's going to come back? But still, it continues like, yeah, the thing's dead. And yeah, I've kind of come to accept that as part of it. But also, especially outside of the country, it's something that we have to be really, really careful about because it's like there's this point when the thing is hot, there's this huge extraction from it that doesn't really think about the future of it or the health of it or everybody that is involved that has built something. It's like there's this like huge cash cow. Everybody is rinsed for everything that this moment has. And then as soon as like that moment feels like it's changing or it's evolving, then we declare the thing dead. And then the same thing has happened previously.
People that maybe have followed my work might be able to view what that might mean in grime, like that story of like, okay, the thing being declared dead and coming back or something like that, or with other genres, drum and bass, dubstep, all these things, they kind of go and come back over time. But then they don't think about actually the impact on the people that are participating in it. Like, what does that do to you? Like, what does that do to your motivation to participate and like what you think about making?
It's super disheartening. And I think especially when you're breaking something brand new, at the beginning, there are so many growing pains and there is so much work that goes to establishing a sound and like getting people to understand it. Let's say for me, it's like years of this radio show, of doing all of this storytelling, of having people interested, and then also this huge investment from like the industry at large. And just when you're at I feel like 5 years is not a very long time. It's a really, really short period of time. And to then declare something as dead before it's even had the opportunity to fully kind of cement itself as something, I feel like for a lot of people, it creates this energy where you kind of, what has happened is that either people have just completely pivoted from it and kind of felt like, well, we just have to move on because there's no life here anymore. Or it's an essence of then trying to change the identity of the thing to appease what people feel like will sell right now or will move right now. And again, there's an added layer because it's a genre that's coming from the African continent where the power dynamics there are really different as well. Where it's like those of us that are here in the West, there are layers of privilege and visibility and cultural dominance that we will always have. And the things that are said over here become definitive in ways that the voices of the people that are creating it kind of get lost in the midst of all of that. And we haven't even really done enough of the work to have all the people that have been coming from South Africa to the UK and touring and playing these big shows to kind of have their own ownership of this thing that they're doing. They've always had to fit into the bodies of the things that we have existing here, and always in ways where they'll come play and are gone the next day and don't really get to be in the fabric of all the things that are going on in a country like the UK. There's so much that hasn't happened, even just in terms of collaborations with producers and artists over here in creating sounds that get to cross over and become like global hits in ways that touch like different touch points. There's so much that we just never even got to do. And then you're told that this thing is dead. It's like, yeah, it's really disheartening. So where do we even go from there? Because it's the very same kind of industry that you want to continue to be booked in, and then it's like, well, actually we're not really focusing on that anymore. We're kind of over here now, we're doing this Afro House thing, or we don't really think we have the audience for that. And it's one of the responses that I got a lot from that Substack piece that I'd written was, it's funny that, you know, this is the conversation that's happening, because for those of us out on the ground, the fans of the music, we don't feel that way. Like, we want to experience like the breadth of it, we love all of it, but we're starting to see the shift of DJs that we've been following for a long time rebranding themselves, or spaces no longer providing the thing that we all knew and loved. But I think it also just scaled way too quickly. Like within 5 years, or even less than that, within 2 years, it was like coming from this thing that was happening in these really niche community-centered spaces to all of a sudden being at like Printworks and selling out that thing. And the novelty was what was moving everything. It was like, this is the first time this has happened. This is the new thing that's this. But you haven't really gotten people to go through the stages of seeing this thing grow through these different spaces before we've gotten to things. So you have like 2,000 people buying tickets to be, it's the FOMO that moves that, the novelty of this thing that we've never experienced before. But once that novelty is worn off, and then it's like, oh, actually, like I won't show up to the next one. It's like, oh, it's not selling as well. It's not doing as well. Like, it was never meant to go at that rate in the first place. But at the same time, it changed a lot of people's lives and put people in these positions, but they're the very same people that are now in this crossroad where it's like, damn, I was at the top of this game and now they're telling me this thing that I've been doing is dead. Yeah.
And is that why you created your own platform?
Yeah. And I feel like I created that early because I saw that coming. I remember me and my friend Cook Sister, who I created Ascension with, it was early on when I was playing in these spaces that I just kept saying to her, I was like, I'm struggling to see where my future exists within this space. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's going to wear off very soon.
When you say this space, like, can you elaborate on what you mean by this space?
In the UK and in Europe, there have been, let's say, for example, outside of like the UK, the place I played the most is Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. And there have been people like Wesley, I speak about him all the time, who created a party, Tribe, Zion Gate. And they were very much working in tandem with the people that are making the music to create something that was future facing. It was this collective vision that we had, this relationship between the promoters, the bookers, and the DJs, where it's like, we're working together to grow the identity of this thing that at this point is now being called African electronic music. But there were only maybe you could count on one hand the amount of parties or spaces that you're playing in, that you're having this relationship with a booker and a promoter who's doing that because they're also a DJ and they're also someone that loves music and they're also somebody that's invested in the future. Whereas when you're trying to fit into the music business, you're not always working with people that are coming from that angle. It's like, what's the ROI here?
Yeah.
And so when you're coming in on what's the ROI, and those are the spaces that I mean, where I'm like, okay, I'm moving through the ranks of being a DJ, and that we know that there's these kind of rites of passage that you go through to get to a particular place and then get signed to an agency, and then there's this way, that this formula that you follow. And I just kept feeling like at some point this isn't going to land anymore, because in the spaces that I'm playing, I'm seeing that the work to kind of make this thing translate is not being done. So I get billed on a lineup in a time frame, on a slot that doesn't really make sense for the overall space. And so people are coming and they're kind of like, oh, okay, I came because, I've heard of you, I've seen you before, but I'm not able to get this thing. It doesn't fit into this like world, which it was going to take a lot more work to figure out how to contextualize it. Let's say, for example, it's kind of was placed a lot in the Afrobeats world. And if you're somebody that plays like me, I'm playing the full length of the songs, because to me, this is house music and this is how I understand it from what it is in South Africa. But then there's so many places where it's being cut down to playing 2 minutes from like the drop and then cutting it off before you even get to the next part. And then that disconnect where you're trying to communicate, that's something that has to be done with everybody collectively. The person that's curating the lineup, the person that's booking the lineup, the person, me, the artist that's playing the music. But it wasn't really working like that. And so it's just like, this is only going to go so far if it stays like this.
Yeah. And then the pre-education before people come to the floor, right?
Exactly.
It's like a lot of, like, I guess I'd count myself as one of those people that came to something for the first time in 2021, 2022, but I'd listened to the music for a year before I'd heard it live. Whereas if you discovered it maybe once it was popping, you hadn't done the kind of initial work to listen to what was going through. And then if your frame of reference is completely different, for example, if your maybe normal electronic music consumption is like house music from America or something, or from Detroit, Chicago, or New York, then you come to this, it's like, this is not like what I've known the music to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then did you think about how you would fit into the industry or the industry of electronic music when you were, I guess, when all this was happening? Like, did you think, oh, okay, like maybe I can sit on a lineup with, a big house DJ and then maybe sometimes with a grime DJ, even though that wouldn't make sense maybe to some other people, but to me, I'm like, oh, like you're like one of us, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
To me, it always made sense. I think that kind of comes down to the way that I play, and also just being somebody that is, like, I love music and I've always been outside in a lot of different spaces and been on so many different types of dance floors. And what I loved about Amapiano, and still do love about Amapiano, is that it has so many pockets. And so I understood which kind of pocket to lean into depending on which lineup I was playing on. And I felt like that was always like a strength of mine, where I could play on a techno lineup and I could play on kind of a very Afrobeat kind of facing lineup. But then I could go and play on like a house lineup, that kind of, the origins of the UK house lineup, but also like US house lineup. And then I would also play in these in-between spaces. Like, one of my favorite things that I've done will be like, then you get booked to play with James Blake on his like CMYK party. And I was always able to fit in these spaces because I guess for me, I kind of listened to the foundation of the sound. So I'm like, okay, I know in these spaces we're kind of a lot more bass heavy, and there's a pocket of Amapiano that really leans into that, or I'll kind of move up into Gom, which is kind of 125 BPM. It's harder, it's darker, it's grittier. And I'm like, that's a pocket that I have that I can lean into. And I think over time, it was a lot of iterations. I started to figure out, let's say, for example, if I'm playing at a festival and everyone before me has kind of been on 125, I quickly learned that dropping it straight down to 113 is going to clear the room, and I'm going to have to spend the next 30 minutes trying to get people to come back. So I'm like, cool, let me start up here first, get people kind of situated and comfortable, and then I can eventually transition them into a different place or a different part of this pocket. And kind of learning how to do that kind of back and forth with people. So it's, I guess, like sandwiching, right? It's like let me give you a little bit of something from what I have that I know is a bit more familiar to you and take you to somewhere else that I know is foreign to you, but I feel like you've got a bit of trust with me now. And then I'll come back to something that you know, and I'd use a lot of like vocals to do that. I'd be like, okay, cool, this is a vocal that you know, you can sing along to it, and then take you back somewhere else into a different place. So that was a skill that I learned over time. And I also used to play really, really long sets, like 6-7 hour sets. So you develop the ability to be able to translate something to people that have never heard it before. And that became really, really important.
Is that where you use your own music to bridge from? Because we've been speaking about you as maybe like an archivist, a journalist, and then a DJ, and then now like you are putting out your own music as an artist. So do you use your own music to be that bridge in the gap, or is that a completely different kind of exploration?
It was, with the Ascension, it was. When we were making that music, that was very much about, we kept finding these spots in our sets where we didn't have the thing that could take us from here to there. And because we had this journey of playing from Amapiano to house all the way up to glam, and then we were also having this live vocal performance thing happening. And there were so many places where we were like, oh, we just need a song that sounds a bit like this, that will fit this gap. And so that was what we kind of came into it with. It was like, hey, let's create this music that will kind of complete these sets that we're curating, because we'd kind of gone playing like everything from like clubs to like art institutions.
Yeah.
And doing this like immersive live experience. So with the Ascension, it was very much that. With me as Charisse C, I kind of stripped away all of those expectations because I really just wanted to figure out my own voice without trying to make it something that was going to make sense for my sets. So I was just, I intentionally didn't go into the making of my first EP with any kind of strategic planning for what would happen with it or where it would fit. It was like, I just want to figure out this thing and play and explore and experiment. And whatever comes out of that, I'll then take it from there. And over time, I think it has then, in hindsight, I can see that kind of interlink, because I think I've always loved, so when I say somebody like a James Blake and these really alternative worlds of R&B, of just electronic music more broadly, ambient music, and I've always felt like there's a home for that, especially in a genre like Amapiano, because it has this way of being able to encompass anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I think there's something unique here that I'm really interested in, because it's the intersections of the worlds that I love, but also I feel like this hasn't been done in this way before. And I kind of see this as a lane that would in some ways become my own, that I can really kind of put a mark on. So yeah, that's then happened over time, where 3-Step, I think, is the music that I've made the most. Again, that was just a timing thing. As this 3-Step was coming out, I was playing more of it. And Kwamzi, who I was working with a lot, was producing a lot of that genre. So it just kind of organically all came together, that I had another one of those things where my breakthrough as a DJ was at the same time as Amapiano, and then my breakthrough as a vocalist was at the same time as 3-Step.
I asked this with a lot of black artists in general, is that a lot of us don't get framed as experimental, even though we're doing new things and being experimental. So like Amapiano is the most experimental new music.
Experimental.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And what you were doing as the Ascension was out there, it was new, it was fresh. That's what magnetized me to it. But then it wouldn't be written about that. It'd be written about like it was just hot or sick. Or, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay, we're missing the lexicon with our new black music to be like, okay, if I don't see it at a particular experimental festival, it's not experimental.
Right.
Like it can be experimental in a pub in Catford. And that description and like framing of it means that we miss many opportunities. Like, yeah, you should be on the lineup with James Blake. That makes complete sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then other people not seeing that potential of that enough doesn't allow us to kind of fully explore what these things can be. Huh?
I feel like it's something that I'm still kind of getting people to understand. But I think the layer of me as a vocalist made that a bit easier. Just me as a DJ, I think, aside from the people that are really paying attention, like there's a core group of people that have always really paid attention to what it is that I'm doing and have understood this multifaceted approach that I have to music. But then again, in the sense of needing things to be efficiently explained, it's like, this is Amapiano, this is the pocket that it exists in. And there's times where I'll like, let's say when I'm kind of working with venues to curate something, and it's like, okay, we'll just bill you alongside this. And I'm like, that's not the world that I'm in. I'm not part of that. But it's like, oh, but you have this type of sound. And it's like, no, but there's more, there's layers to it. And there's things that I'm doing that are different that sit more over here. So then coming out and making music and being able to, again, that's what me and Cook Sister very quickly understood about the Ascension, like creating these art installations and these immersive experiences and having us dressed in the ways that we were dressed just allowed.
Who was the designer of the clothes?
Oh, the Boiler Room one was Gregory, and that was actually his graduate collection piece. And I'd come across it and I'd sent him a message. And then we spent a lot, we both love like fashion in that way. So we spent a lot of time always messaging different people that we've seen that are creating different things and basically communicating to them what this idea was in this world. So all of those things, I think, allowed it to make sense to people that there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye in terms of it's not just this thing that only exists in this one pocket, in this one type of party in the club, but actually it has a home in so many other different places. Yeah.
I guess like we're in 2026 now, 5 years removed from then, from 2021. 5 years in the future, what do you see the shape and where this music, maybe let's start with the music first and then you next. So we start with, I guess, all of these threads that are opened up.
Yeah.
Do you see that changing here, or is that something that you think, it's always going to be like a niche bit of the fabric of our kind of dance music?
Yeah. I think there's this kind of natural equilibrium that's happening right now where it feels like when something is emerging in that way, things happen at a rate where it's very difficult to be able to kind of zoom out and see things for what they are. And it feels chaotic in a lot of ways. And everybody's just kind of going with the motions, trying to keep up with it. And then there's this moment now where it's like the dust settles in a way. And the people that remain are kind of the core of the lovers of this thing. And I'm excited by that right now because we're not having to explain what it is anymore. I think that's been clear over time. We've also done the proofs of concepts, and we've also shown that this music can sell these huge stages. It can do these huge numbers. It's capable. We've shown what it's capable of. And so now I feel like it's a space where artists can kind of come back, especially like the African artists can kind of come back to a place of, I'm not operating from a place of having to prove anything anymore. It's now, what do I actually want for myself? And what is my vision for this thing? And where do I see this going? And I think it's happening really beautifully. I'd say Devon Gogo is somebody that, seeing where she's at now, where it's like, okay, you're at ADE and you're doing the opening concert with an orchestra and like creating these things that she's doing like a 24-hour set in April. There's this pulling back, this exhaling, this breathing and being like, okay, cool. How do I actually want to be understood and how do I want to establish myself? And then also more people creating their own things, where I think we spend a lot of time having to fit into the pockets of what already existed. It's like, I'm at a point where Abantu is 6 years old now, and a lot of the things that I was doing, I was learning them in real time. And I've kind of found my flow. I've built my systems and my processes, and like I have a clear understanding of where I sit within this space and how to build from here. And that, I think for me, is like, it's so much of a better place for me to operate from. It's not frantic and it's not pressured. It's clear and it's anchored. And I'm also then able to carve out ways of doing things that are my own. I think it kind of connects with a lot of people right now challenging, again, what we're saying, like widely, the West and these models of doing things. I think when you're looking at the African continent, we've always had our own systems and ways of doing things. And I think there's a lot that we can kind of learn from anchoring ourselves in those, but maybe iterating them and thinking about how it serves us best. So I think that's what's really exciting right now. And what I was saying earlier, also just the untapped opportunity for these crossovers to happen, where artists from here in the diaspora, those of us that have grown up here, can really create this music that speaks to who we are and the lives that we've lived in this country and these kind of countries that we've called home outside of the continent, while still being rooted in this kind of heritage that we have of music. So I think it's a really exciting time. And because now it's opened up beyond Amapiano and people are really cognizant of the differences and the layers of the sounds, you have like something, again, referencing ADE, where I'm stood there in the booth and I'm kind of having this realization that there's like Atmos Black, who is 3-step, there's DJ Lag, who is Gom, and there's Debon Gogo, who is Amapiano, and then you have like people like Da Capo and Black Coffee's doing this like 17,000 capacity thing over here. This is all in the same week. I'm like, okay, we've finally arrived at this place where this music is all able to coexist and people are playing all different types of parties and lineups, and you've got Uncle Waffles doing this over there. And I'm like, this is I feel like we're in a great place now.
Mm-hmm.
And the place that I always hoped that we'd finally land at, where it's like, okay, we've got this breadth of musical offering and just so many opportunities that we can explore of how to, yeah,
like new possibility space. Like it's not like people are seeing one mode of success or one way of doing things. They're like, okay, there's like 1,000 possible ways to kind of cut through and do something interesting.
Yeah.
And like especially having the dialogue between the two places. Like I see people going to South Africa, like in December or January, whatever it's going to be, and coming back. And like that back and forth a lot more than probably people did back in the day.
Yeah, and that's another thing actually, even just observing each year, because I'm usually there for like 4 months of the year in that kind of period from December to March. And I'm noticing at the beginning, it was like a lot of the DJs and the people that were participating in the space that were kind of going back and wanting to experience the music in the source so that they could translate what they were doing over here. And then I feel like over time, we've then had people that were traveling because they wanted, the fans of the music that wanted to experience it. And now I'm observing like people from just a broader collective of people that are all going to experience it. Because Dirty December was always there. I think it was very majorly like Nigeria and Ghana. But now, especially in Cape Town, I think Cape Town is going to do something really, really interesting and has the potential to be another one of these like meccas of house music. Just the way that the city is built makes it perfect for this kind of holiday experience, this like musical offering, the beach and all of these type of things. It's beautiful. The food is great. Like, so I think there's just so much that we can do. What I really just want us to be able to do is to organize ourselves, to really take ownership of the things that we already have. I think it's just a matter of structure and strategizing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been beautiful to see so many more people, even people outside of that. Like, I love R&B as well. I always talk about it. And you're seeing people like Sasha Kibo, and she's in South Africa performing because it's a huge R&B, but like market in South Africa as well. But then the Amapiano is still always there within those spaces. So there's just a richer cultural exchange now, I think, where the markets that people are kind of thinking about when they're touring are expanding. Like a place like South Africa, maybe a lot of people would leave out on their tour dates when they're thinking about, you know, doing this world tour. But now I think people understand how much of a big market there is there. So it's like becomes anchored. It's also us then being at the center of that and curating these festivals that become these landmarks that people travel to annually to experience the music. Yeah, I think that's what I'm excited for.
And then for you as an artist?
For me as an artist, I think I'm finally in a space now where I've established a sound that really feels like my own. And I think over time, the layers of the things that I'm interested in will reveal themselves. I think I've also arrived at this place where all the experience that I've ever had has come full circle in a way. Like Charisse, who started out as a journalist, who then kind of moved on into DJing and broadcasting, to Charisse, who is a vocalist and a singer-songwriter and a producer, to Charisse, who is a curator. I think I'm in a space where all of these kind of intersections of who I am are like working in a really nice way together, which I think it took a long time for me to arrive at that point, and I kind of had to silo in on each one at different points. But now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, these things they're working together, they're moving together. And so I'm excited for that to just kind of continue evolving. I think at the core of everything, I've always understood myself as a storyteller, the mediums of that are different. So whether I'm DJing or I'm singing or I'm creating these spaces, there's always, it's a storytelling thing. That's what I think is my purpose. So yeah, I'm excited for that to kind of keep unveiling itself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
That's perfect.
Cool.